Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Automation Nation. It's our new show for all of you in the automation and enterprise AI space. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI, the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence. We are a professional association and peer-to-peer research network, providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members globally, all around automation, AI, digital transformation. And I'm joined by my co-host, the founder of IRPA AI and digital disruptor himself, Frank Casale. Frank, good afternoon.
Dan, great opening. Great to be here. You have much better lighting than me, so I automatically feel at a disadvantage. So I'm somewhat anxious, but looking forward to our discussion, Dan.
Hey, I'm just hosting today, so I just have to look good. You have to have all the good answers. So as long as your answers are good, we don't care about the lighting.
I have Chat GBT, so if there's something I struggle with, I'm just gonna type it up and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is part of on the top 5 reasons why automation salespeople lose deals. And before we jump into kind of this installment, Frank, let's briefly recap last week we spoke about your number one reason why people lose deals, and it was really around finding the right decision maker and getting stuck with the wrong people. Yes.
Well, yes. And by the way, as a preface, Dan, as I mentioned to you not so long ago, my goal is not to be here as the know-it-all. I have been doing deals most of my career. I've had the good fortune, and I continue to have the good fortune of working with and alongside some of the best in the business. So I've learned from the best. I continue to learn, and I'm always happy to share with others because so many of us are out there pursuing deals, crafting deals, orchestrating deals. It takes months, sometimes years, and where we could share insights and save someone grief and help make for a better deal, then all the better. So I'm here kind of channeling all those that I've learned from Dan. How was that, Dan? That was my best attempt at modesty. How was it, Dan?
I was starting to get concerned. That seemed too modest for you, but no. In all seriousness, people see us as a source of education and networking, but more and more, especially in an era where there's less conferences and things. We're here helping members, coaching. So we encourage everybody to reach out if you have something you're working on, if you need some help, some advice, and like we say, we're fortunate in the sense that we don't have all the answers, but we typically know the people that do. If we don't, just sitting at the center of a large network up to 130,000 members now. So I'm sure.
Let me answer your question. I didn't answer your question, and so let me a quick story that'll answer that question, and maybe if you decide to segue, then we can go right from there. So Dan, you live in New York as I do here, and you live in Long Island, New York, as I do, and there's this place here called PC Richards. Are you familiar with that place? You go there, it's all the gear. It's awesome. So I was there a couple of weeks ago, and I'm looking at, even though I wasn't there for a flat screen TV, how could you not look? So TVs, you don't think you don't need one, but maybe you do. Who knows? There they are, all these TVs. And right behind, over my right shoulder, there's a 10-year-old kid sitting in one of those massage chairs. And he's sitting in that chair, there's all the buttons, and it's all kind of cool. And while his parents were shopping for whatever they were shopping for, he was sitting in that chair, Dan. So I looked at that, and here's what I realized, right? If you look at that, he is not buying that damn chair. And he, as much as he may like it, he's not the decision maker. He's really just enjoying the experience. So if you look at that, that scenario happens in the automation world every week, where there's somebody that calls up a vendor, a software provider, or whatever, and they say, hey, you have this thing, intelligent automation, and let's check it out. And then there's somebody on the other side goes right on the pipeline, says, oh, got me another one here. This is going to be good. This guy was interested, and not to confuse interest with a qualified deal, not to confuse somebody who's enthusiastic or excited about the massage chair that you happen to have, because it's comfortable, it's leather, has all these buttons. I think they're about 5 or 6 grand. You probably have two of them, Dan. I know you make the big bucks. So, so, so not to confuse interest with a viable, qualified opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that is, often the way people kind of go, especially when, and I speak to a lot of our vendor members who are trying to figure out how to go to market, and oftentimes their challenge is a lack of pipeline, right? And so, initially they go the opposite direction. They generate a whole bunch of pipeline, and it feels good for a minute until you realize that it's a waste of time, money, resources, and the like, and you're not really any further along than you were before.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I first, and I think you know the story, Dan, so bear with me, but when I first founded IRPA AI, before you started running it and taking it to new heights, which you are, so kudos to you for that. But when I first started, so you launched this thing, and this was like what, 10 years ago, Dan? And I started to bump into people to say, hey, I see you're into RPA, because that's where the bulk of the discussions were back then, right? You're into RPA. Hey, I'm into RPA. And then we would go blah, 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 back and forth. We'd be talking for an hour on RPA. And I'm thinking, wow, they're really interested. And I'm just like the network guy at that point, and getting people connected and educated, what we were doing back in the beginning, as you recall. But most of those conversations early on didn't go anywhere. And it frustrated me a bit, because here I am, I was very passionate about this topic. And um, and when I was talking to people, they seemed passionate, and I assumed they were going to do things. And when many of them didn't initially, I was just wondering, am I not doing a good job? Do we need to convey this? Or and there's a thing that I learned early on, which is people have to not only get it, but the time has to be right, and there has to be some sort of a driver. So what I mean to say is, at some point, maybe about 3 or 4 months post launch, when people would say to me, hey, I'm really interested in RPA, I just stopped and said, great, why? That was the first thing I said. I didn't go off and have a whole major love fest on RPA at that time, because most of them didn't have an answer. And the key is, they have to have a reason. There has to be something compelling. And if it's just that this seems like a interesting new piece of tech, and they want to check it out, whoever they are, which is their prerogative. But you're on the sell side. You might be an advisor, you might be a sales rep, you might be some solution executive, whoever you may be. If it's not clear to you or to your team what the driving force is, and if the driving force is not a business driver, there's a good chance that you're going to be wasting time if you don't spend more time on the front end, actually slowing down and meeting with people there and asking questions.
So that's a good one, Frank. What are other than why, which may seem like a difficult question for somebody who's speaking to a prospect. What other questions have you seen really sniff out the what we used to say, the buyers versus the liars, right?
Yes. So well, listen, and for those friends of ours that are buyers, if they're listening live or recorded, there's just as much of a sales job to be done internally if you're the point person internal. So
Good point.
this isn't only meant for the external salesperson. Sometimes you are the internal salesperson. And in many cases, you're as frustrated as anyone else trying to affect change. I would not underestimate ever the power behind the question why. I would tell you 90% of salespeople don't ask any questions. They just show up and throw up. Please stop doing that. And the few that do ask questions very rarely ask the question why, because it almost seems like it's a challenge, and you almost feel like you're going to screw up your momentum or slow things down. I encourage the question why, because it just gives you a sense. Is it top line? Is it bottom line? Somebody looking to grow? Somebody looking to reduce? somebody looking to expand? Like, what is it? Otherwise, all you're going to be talking about are features of your product, and you can't connect any benefits. But questions beyond. Well, questions I ask tend to have to do either with, think of concentric circles. The most outermost circle is learning about the company. Then it's about that department. Then it's about that person. So you could start out in or in out, but from the standpoint of the company, what are they going through, right? Are they beat up just due to the market recently? We all know, Dan, there's a bunch of layoffs.
Yep.
So is that what's going on, or are they in aggressive growth mode? Right. So it helps to just get a sense of context. And ideally, if you're doing this for a living, you know enough to do some research before you jump on a call. And then beyond that, though, it's within that is what's going on in that department. So let's say that department is HR within this company. What's going on? If you aren't able to research that, then find out from that person what's going on. Are they having challenges around benefits administration? Is this an HRIS thing? Are they recruiting like crazy? They're hiring so many people that they have kind of gridlock around onboarding, right? So you're really trying to get a sense of the broader context of a day in the life of that person, and then ultimately you're looking for a problem to solve. Either they will tell you what it is, or if they're not sure, then you'll help them find that, identify either that problem or that opportunity. So my advice is, show up as a consultant initially before you end up being a salesperson. Ask questions, get to know, become as an expert on that company and that department and that person as soon as you can. And it's not unusual for it to take more than one meeting. So don't rush it. Don't rush it, because if you come out fast out of the gate, you may end up feeling like you're moving quickly, and 3 weeks later, you have nothing. You're chasing people, and lots of voicemails and nothing happening. So sometimes you have to slow it down to speed it up.
So, in a sense, and you and I have talked off camera about this, in a sense, what you're really trying to do is disqualify as quickly as possible, right? Get the junk off your calendar, out of your pipeline, so you can kind of focus on, what the right 80-20 is ideally. But, for those watching right now, Frank, who are like, this is all nice and all, but, there's no conferences going on or less conferences going on. There's layoffs, the economy's uncertain, all these challenges. If I'm a sales leader out there saying, Frank, why don't we just chase everything? Like, I hear what you're saying. Well, that's good questions, but why not chase everything? Because our pipeline is suffering, and that's the job of salespeople, isn't it?
Well, it's a fair question. It's a trick question, Dan, but
Not me.
Yeah. Troublemaker. So here's the thing. No, never. Value your time, because if you don't value it, others won't. Ask questions. And to your point, Dan, you've heard me say this before, in order to qualify, you need to disqualify. If you haven't, booted an opportunity or two or five off of your pipeline in the past 30, 60, 90 days, if you haven't, then you're not qualifying anyone. That means everybody. And hope is not a strategy. We've all seen book cover. So I have no problem having very little in my pipeline and having a bunch of free time to find the next winning opportunity. And by the way, winning meaning both sides. Because if nothing happens, you're wasting a bunch of people's time on all sides of the equation, right? And Dan, allow me to just back up to the other question you mentioned, you asked before about questions to ask. So when you see those commercials about the investment companies, and they have to, just due to compliance and regulatory, they have to say past performance is no indication of, what they could do for you now. They have to say that legally. I would say with companies, past performance is an indicator. So have they embraced automation? Have they embraced emerging tech? Have they shown a track record of, do they get it? Are they change agents internally? You want to get a sense of, you're stepping into the middle of a movie here. What happened? You want to come in blind? If they tell you they've evaluated 2 or 3 different platforms. They've launched this, they've integrated this, they've customized that. Then you're ready to rock and roll. If you're good and your stuff is good, you have something there. If they've done nothing, if they've been kind of window shopping, but nothing's happened there for the past 3 years, you may be the first, and you may be able to take that on. But my question at that point would be, I would in a very friendly way, ask them, why would this be any different?
Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be anything going on there. It's like a museum.
Yeah, for me, when it's those repeats of people that didn't do anything the first time or the second time, my go-to is a variation on your why question, which is why now? Like what's changed from the last 3 times we spoke when you weren't ready to move forward, right?
Yeah, ask the questions. Don't be afraid of blowing your deal. Ask questions. Ask questions about timing. Ask questions about interest. Ask them if they're looking at anything else. I mean, what I'm saying is obvious to probably half of the people listening, and not obvious to the other half. Or you don't want to seem pushy, or you don't want to seem like you don't know. I would say the most confident deal makers I know are the ones asking the most questions. It's awesome. And you've been in meetings where I've literally acknowledged, that guy just asked an awesome question. I think, good questions are as valuable as good answers. All my stuff, Dan. Ask good questions. The person with the best questions in that meeting is the one that leaves with the most. So, yep. I could ramble on each one of these segments, but I want to follow your cues, Dan. And because you have much better lighting, I'm not sure if this is part of your negotiating benefit. Look at your lighting, Dan. Look at mine. I mean, I'm in a bright room here. You probably have a very expensive camera.
I don't know, but you have some cool artwork. So for those watching, send us your questions. If you have any questions for us, we want this to be interactive. We want to answer your questions or even your comments. So please go ahead and send those through. But Frank, while we're waiting for questions, what's the deal with the art behind you?
Thank you. Well, I'll plug my son, Cool Man Coffee, Dan. He's a social media influencer, artist, animator. So thanks, Dan. That's my boy. That's my one of 4, my oldest, Danny Casale, Cool Man Coffee, Dan. So his mom wanted, of course, the biggest painting he ever painted, and of course she got it.
That's it. Mom what she wants.
I'm still waiting for a coffee mug or something, but at least mom got the big print.
So we got folks. So Ben's agreeing with you, Frank, about asking the right questions. We've got some hellos here from India. Some people that are happy to see you, Frank. I guess people miss you on the event circuit, lighting or not, Frank.
Well, listen, some of the people making notes here, which is very nice, are experienced deal makers. And if someone has a particular question they want us to talk about, that's the benefit of this format that you've put together here, Dan. Please, this is really ideally to create a discussion. If you have something that's worked for you, please share it so we can share it with the team. Just type it in there, or there's a particular topic. I mean, when you talk about qualifying, everybody in the room nods their head, but I just don't know that people aren't. The majority of people aren't doing it, and you're better off knowing early on.
So Ben's got a great question, Frank, which is, how many objections do you go through before disqualifying, and how do you distinguish between an objection that you could overcome, versus just, hey, this thing's never going to go anywhere?
So that's Ben. Do you know Ben's title, Dan? You ever go to Ben's LinkedIn profile. Not now. I don't want to disrupt. But Ben's title is Vibe Master Worldwide. So it's all about the vibe for Ben. So he's a cool guy and a cool buddy and a colleague of ours. Well, I would say, listen, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So it is you as a deal person is going to determine if that's something you can overcome, then that's an objection you feel you could overcome that, right? You have a sense. But if you're speaking to someone that is too low in the organization or the wrong department, then right off the bat you don't have a decision maker. Doesn't mean you hang up mid conversation, but no, you have somebody who may be an influencer, maybe a gatekeeper, but just know who you're speaking to. So that's number one: is the deal's not qualified. You have somebody sitting in that chair at PC Richards. Maybe there's something going on, but it's by no means a deal. I'm not wor- I typically don't worry about pricing or contracts or terms, or there's always questions about integration and things like that. But I would say most important for me is in my direct dialogue with the decision maker. If I'm not, can I get there? So if you're speaking to a person who doesn't have any juice, but they don't want you to talk to anybody else, I mean, that's where you're going to see how good your discipline is. Uh, so why would they do that, right? At some point, ideally, they want to open it up to allow for other people to join, especially the decision makers. If they don't want to do that on the first call, I get that, because the big boss doesn't necessarily want to speak to somebody every day. But if you're not speaking to the decision maker, get with that decision maker. And then, and equally important, maybe even more so, is what's the driver? What's the what? Technology's a how. It's about what's the what. So is it about, do they want to reduce cost? For some reason, all my advisory friends and my analyst buddies, they do not like the reduced cost. It's not sophisticated enough. It's not comprehensive enough. I love it because at the end of the day, it's a lot easier to build a business case in that scenario. If they say productivity, if they use that term, it does get me a little bit concerned, because the first thing I'm going to do right after that is get them to define that, because they likely cannot get three people in the company to agree on productivity. It's the same three people who will not agree on what innovation means. So I'm looking for, as I'm asking my questions and listening for the answers in my mind, I'm dynamically bored of my mind. I'm sketching a business case, and it's either looking better, better, better based on the conversation, or it's looking worse, worse, worse. Right. So, so I'm looking to see what the driver is. Is there a real driver that you on the sell side, externally or internally, see is, oh man, we're going to knock this one out of the park. I get a sense they're being candid with me. We can knock this one out of the park, and we could do it. At that point, if you think you have or can get to a decision maker and they have a problem that you recognize because you've done it a half of times before, I start rock and rolling from there. I mean, you want to work your way down the list as far as timing and budget and everything else. But I would say those are two key scenarios.
Yeah, Sachin's agreeing, and he's saying, how well do you really know what they're trying to do? I think he's kind of alluding to, avoid the generic, I want to automate stuff for the sake of automating stuff, right?
No, it's a waste of everyone's time. And again, it doesn't mean that the person you're talking to has bad intentions, but and by the way, the person you're talking to could be an internal cheerleader for you, and it could be, an alternate strategy is, let me get this person kind of up to speed on what we do, and they're going to go internally and shop it around. If you find somebody internally who's passionate about either the category or even better, your product, then that's not bad. That's kind of an alternate play. But as long as you know that, you invest X amount of time with them, and then they shop it around, and then they may come back with something. It's not unusual for companies, large, medium, and small, to have those kind of people internally, the kind of catalysts, the kind of change agents. And if they have a good rep internally, they go knock on the CFO's door or the head of the call center, and they say, I think I have something. I just spoke with Dan Goodstein, some interesting stuff, let's bring them in, and they go. But again, ask the questions and find out. So if they don't have a real pressing need now, it might be, hey, I'm always looking for new stuff. We're always looking for ways to increase top line or bottom line. As someone mentioned to me over dinner last week in the city, okay, we have something, come on in. I'm going to shop you around. I've done deals that way, but at least know what that is. But you don't want, but beyond those two, the rest is just a big, deep, dark, cold valley, a valley of deal despair, Dan. You don't want to be in that valley.
No, I remember at an event many years ago, and I can't recall who it was that said it, Frank, but it always stuck out to me. He asked the audience, who was the second smartest person in an RFP? He said, the first smartest is obviously the one that won, the vendor that won, but the second smartest was the first one out.
Yeah, right. Got no one to fold them. It saves you a lot of time. Yep. So yeah, I would say, that is also important too, to get a sense of Who else are they looking at? And it's a double-edged sword. So on one hand, they may say, "Oh, we're not talking to anyone else," and you say, "Oh, this is awesome. I'm the only one in here." But on the other hand, then you wonder, how serious are they, right? Most active deals with momentum behind them, they're shopping. So why not? If you're good, if your product's good, you should be able to compete and win your deal.
So Jermaine's asking, how long do you stay involved, Frank? And how active should you be, in the process versus kind of being the silent supporter?
How well, if I understand the question, listen, there's an art and science to this, and I find good, solid deals build momentum, and you maintain that momentum. And there's a certain cadence, right? You send an email, they respond the next day. 3 days later, you're on the phone. Then there's a follow-up thing. You establish a certain cadence, like music. We've also been to deals where you call, leave a voicemail, nothing. Then you call, leave another voicemail, and it's 2 weeks later, nothing's happening. You say, "Oh, something's changed." So part of it is getting off to a good start, but then keeping things on track. And when something changes, you gotta be listening, to that tempo and that cadence. But if you start losing it in the middle of your deal cycle, I would reconnect with your key people there and find out what's going on. And if you're not happy with the answer, you may have to kind of reconstitute that deal or go away. And by the way, one other thing, you may go away forever, whatever that means, or you just go away for now, right? Do they have? Are they in the middle of an audit? The CEO just quit? Did they just delay their IPO? Things along those lines. So I don't have a magical answer, but I would say, up front, you want to establish momentum. If you do that, you're fine. And then from there forward, you want to just make sure you're maintaining that, and be smart and listen. Don't ignore cues of something's up. As deal people, we tend to be optimists. So something happens, they say, "Well, they didn't call me right back, but that's okay. I know I could save this," or they weren't happy with the proposal, but I know I could overcome it. I would say once in a while, shift from optimist to pragmatist, or even play pessimist once in a while on your deals. Play the other guy in the room who's the pessimist, who tends to piss you off when you're having your meeting, and there's always that guy that's like poking all the holes at your deal. Be that person, or invite that person in the room and see where the holes are, because you will do yourself a favor. The truth shall set you free.
Plus, it changes the dynamic. Like you said, salespeople tend to be optimists, but we also tend to be, solution centric, and always say, "Yes, we can do this," when sometimes you can't. Sachin's saying, be realistic and be honest about, what you can do, and whether they're ready, and you can't automate a broken process. But I think about some of these deals where, when the salesperson says, "You know what, I don't think we can help you," changes the whole dynamic, and increases the level of credibility that person has for, "Hey, I'm a prospect and you just told me you don't think you can help me. Now I'm like, I want to sell you now."
Well, that I agree, Dan. I mean, if you be careful of saying yes to everything, and be careful presenting that you could do everything, because they won't believe it.
Right.
I mean, you're not in the room, right? So, I had one senior decision maker in a big bank once tell me, if a client shows more than three things, he doesn't believe it.
Right.
6, 7, 8, 10 things that they do. Everybody's good at 2 or 3 things, whether they want to admit it or not.
Yeah, my final piece of advice is, you have X amount of time, to your point earlier, Frank, right? About, spending the time instead of chasing deals that are never going to happen, focusing on finding the next deal, right? I think about that 80-20, right? The mistake people make is they look at their pipeline and they divide their time evenly between each thing on their pipeline. You got to find the 80-20. And if you have a bunch of junk there, then you're spending your time on the 80% that'll never close. But that's kind of what I think about when I look at a pipeline. Frank, any final thoughts from your standpoint?
Well, why, you done with me? Is that a subtle?
That's it. That's code for we're out of time.
I was just warming up. Oh, okay. No, always great to speak with you, Dan. You're awesome, buddy. So, listen, I almost felt silly doing this segment because there's so many good salespeople out there, and I'm just, again, sharing and channeling what I've learned. However, I'll just repeat, 80% of y'all are not qualifying. Ask questions. Do yourself a favor. Show up, ask a lot of questions before you answer questions. Know what you're looking for. If you're not sure, determine it ahead of time. If you're new in a new role, determine. We're looking for this type of person, this type of problem, this type of company, right? And then you know what you're looking for. And if it's not there, you could give it a little bit of time to do your research. But know that if that deal isn't right for you, there's 2,000. Last time I checked, there's 2,000 global 2,000 companies. So there's plenty of others out there. There's no shortage of people with problems. There really are. And there's no shortage of people that are really, really interested. Want to be an optimist, that we all are, is that deal is dead or kind of like a zombie in zombie mode. Move on. You'll sell them next year. There's another 100 people out there that are looking for what you're looking for.
Yep. Sounds good. And if you're here and you're looking for additional ways to build your pipeline, qualified automation-centric people, check us out. We've got a variety of programs, both on the marketing side as well as on the sales lead generation side. IRPAai.com/services. Or if you just want to talk and get some advice and coaching, we're happy to do that as well. But in the meantime, check us out. In 2 weeks, I think we'll do the number 3 thing in the top 5 reasons why salespeople are losing deals. And we'll have Frank back again.
What's the next one?
I don't know.
It's
your list.
I'm doing one more. That's it. You better change the face. No one will show up anymore.
It's the top 5. You got to do 5. You can't do 3. It's a top 5.
How about 4.5? All right, Dan. Great job. Goodbye, everybody. A lot of fun.
Thanks, everybody.
Take
Talk
care.
soon. Take care. Bye-bye.